Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. Towards the end of Meditation 5, Rene Descartes, after providing an ontological argument for the existence of God, and after talking about the true and immutable natures, that he can know the essences of things, which, by the way, fits into that ontological argument, Descartes is going to introduce a new set of considerations that are going to be centrally important for his project. Let's remind ourselves, what is his project? It's not just to engage in doubt. He is not a skeptic. He wants to use a sort of mitigated skepticism, carefully channeled, to erase all the previous beliefs and then rebuild them on a solid basis. And that solid basis is provided by the cogito, by the understanding of the human being as thinking substance, by the argument for the existence of God, and by the criterion of clear and distinct ideas. That is, ideas that I conceive of clearly and distinctly. He says that he can, in fact, rely upon those, and part of that is because of the existence of God and the nature of God as not being a deceiver, as we're going to come to. This is going to allow him, in the following meditation, to bring back the external material world of extended things, including his body and all the things his body can interact with. So this is a centrally important argument that he is providing here. He tells us, after the argument for the existence of God, that only what I can conceive of clearly and distinctly can persuade me entirely. That is, clear and distinct ideas is what gets me out of this endless cycle of doubt. And if I didn't have the possibility of relying upon these as, you might say, stable foundations, I really wouldn't be able to get anywhere, because anything that I think is clear and distinct, maybe I'd be wrong about that. And we have to deal with the fact that, as he's pointed out in Meditation 4, our understandings, our intellects, are in fact quite limited. So, he tells us that what is clear and distinct is what I can judge, that I actually know. And then he says that these fall into two classes of things. So he says, the sorts of things that I conceive of this type, some of them have a truth that is manifestly or clearly known to anybody who thinks about them. So maybe you don't think about the nature of a triangle, but when you do have to realize that one angle, like in a square triangle, the square triangle, that angle is bigger than the other ones. You don't even have to know much geometry to figure that out, right? As a matter of fact, geometry can begin with talking about that. You can say, listen, children, do you see these angles? Which one is bigger? Now, that is something that we could call, in some respects, self-evident. It provides its own clear and distinct idea to the person who's considering it. And if somebody says, I just don't understand it, you can say to them, well, look again, right? And we might consider other ideas along those sorts of lines, like the whole is greater than any one of its parts. That might be, equally self-evident. There's a whole history of discussions about what is self-evident in the background of what Descartes is talking about. But then, and this is where it becomes, very critical, there are a lot of things where I can come to conceive of them clearly and distinctly, but only after I've made some sort of effort, and only when I consider them closely or exactly, exactement in French, when I'm actually paying close attention to them. And here Descartes doesn't just have in mind things that require us to look at them closely. He's also got in mind things that rely on some sort of argument or chain of evidence being provided. And if you think about mathematical or geometrical proofs, those provide a great example. They can be quite lengthy. And as you're going through the proof, each part of it is being conceived clearly and distinctly, but you might not grasp the totality of it. And then you get to the end and you're like, well, I buy into all these transformations here, so the results must be right, but I don't completely grasp the totality of what's going on here. Descartes thinks that in those cases, you still can rely upon it so long as you haven't made any mistake in the inferences or smuggled in some unclear or false or dubious premises, right? So when we're thinking about the nature of the triangle again, and we consider the three angles, and let's say we're talking about a right triangle, we know that the two other angles have to add up to the same thing as that 90-degree right angle, right? That requires a demonstration. And we might be able to keep that in our mind all the time, but most of us, Descartes included, by the way, Descartes was a mathematical genius, so if Descartes can't keep it in his mind all the time, probably most of us can't. We can't keep it in our mind all the time. So we know that we conceived of it clearly and distinctly at one time. We know that we judged it to be true. Can we still rely upon that? If we can't, then we're stuck having to recreate everything at every single point, and the prospects for attaining any certain knowledge outside of the sphere of the cogito, the myself as thinking substance, or the existence of God, becomes pretty dim, doesn't it? How are we going to get to know the entire outside world? We'd have to become pessimists. So Descartes says that once I actually have conceived of something clearly and distinctly, I can rely upon that as a sort of acquisition. Why? I can trust it and I can make use of it going forward. So think of the results, again, in mathematics. You prove certain theorems. Now you can use those going forward. You might forget how you proved it, but you could always go back and do it again and see that you didn't make any mistakes. Hopefully, right? I can't always be considering every single idea that I have in my mind, so how can I be assured that I can actually trust and make use of them going forward? Well, there's two parts to the answer to this, two ways of conceiving of this. One is I can remember that I did in fact arrive at a previous judgment that the thing was true. And if I've been following the sort of, you might call it an ethics of the mind that was laid out in the previous meditation, where I don't allow my will to go past what my intellect clearly and distinctly conceives of, then I can be sure that the thing was true then and is still going to be true now. If I'm playing fast and loose, however, I can't really trust that now, can I? And then, everything would sort of fall back into these doubts. He says, I would not have a true and certain science of anything, whatever it may be, but only vague and inconstant opinions. So that would be a real problem for Descartes. But he thinks, I can rely on my memory of having proven it or discovered it to be true. So there's that. But reinforcing that, and according to Descartes, really central to this, is the fact that I can rely upon God not being a deceiver. Because I have proven the existence of God, as he claims to have done in Meditation 5 and in Meditation 3, and because he has arrived at the knowledge that God could not be a deceiver, because that would be to lack a perfection, which is incompatible with the very notion of God as being a being possessing all perfections, I can trust that the true and immutable natures that I'm grasping through clear and distinct ideas are in fact real. They are true. So because God is not a deceiver, and because I can rely upon my memory, I don't have to go back and prove everything once again. I can now make progress. So you see how this is really centrally important to the entire Cartesian project. He doesn't just want to have knowledge of a few things. He wants to develop science that he can rely upon, and this is going to be a central part of that. This is one of the linchpins of the very possibility of science.